I've had a number of emails, a number of messages, text messages, comments on social media about this, and so I want to address it. First of all, the idea that anybody, listen to me carefully, anybody that goes against the grain of the popular narrative is an Uncle Tom is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's no basis for it, right? There's no basis for it. And if you understand, I can't speak for anybody else. I can't speak for any other leader. I can't speak for any other minister, any other personality, any other platform. But I can only speak for myself. And the idea that I would be considered a sellout because of something that I have put out here recently is ridiculous. You didn't have a problem with me before. You didn't have a problem with anything I said before. But so we got to understand this happening. Secondly, let me give you a little history lesson. And I invite any black intellectual to debate me on this. I'm open for a public debate. I don't care who it is. Michael Eric Dyson, Cornel West, anybody that you have that wants to go back and forth with me about this, I'm willing to have this discussion, okay? So understand that if you look at the African American community historically, we are literally one of the most historically in America, the African American community, and I'm using this in quotes, one of the most morally, historically conservative communities in America. So moral conservatism is not new to the black community. It is actually a historical position. You know, if you understand emancipation from 1863, 1865, most blacks in America had to be a part of a more conservative party because it was the conservative party that actually helped to liberate the slaves. So black people immediately identified with that party as, you know, from a political standpoint.
October is Family History Month, and I've been doing my family history for about 6 years. I started in around February 2014, and I made a lot of great discoveries, and there are discoveries that have yet to be made. One of the discoveries that I found was on my mother's side. Her grandfather was named Pearlie Young, and I was able to discover one of the final slaveholding families for my young ancestors. My great-grandfather, Pearlie Young, he was born in Dallas County, Alabama. And one of the final slaveholding families was the Blevins family, also in Dallas County, Alabama. And when you're doing research, particularly family history research, you want to find out as much about the time and locations where your ancestors lived. So I've been researching Dallas County, Alabama. And I was also led to the Federal Writers Project, the Slave Project, where the formerly enslaved were interviewed, and they were asked questions about, you know, their name and age, where they were born, and things like that. And there was one particular woman, her name was Mac Brantley. The interview was around 1938 or so, and she said she was around 80 years old, and she said she was born in Dallas County, but at the time she was living in Arkansas. So when she said Dallas County, I piqued my interest because I was like, that's where my ancestors are. And she also mentioned Dr. Blevins, the same Blevins that was the former slaveholders for my ancestors. I don't think that Mac Brantley is kin to me. She might be, but as of right now, I don't have any proof of that. But I do think she knew my ancestors. She was aware of them. She walked in the same county, knew the same families and things like that. Here are her words. I was born in Dallas County, close to Selma, Alabama. My mother's owners was Miss Mary Ann Roscoe, and her husband was Master Ephraim Roscoe. They had a good-sized gin and farm. We would gather around and tell tales till we would be scared to go home in the dark. The wind would turn the old-fashioned screw and make a noise like packing cotton. We older children would run and make out. We thought it was the spirits. We knowed better, but the little children was afraid. My parents was Lucindy Roscoe. My pa belonged to Warren Brantley. His name was Silica Brantley. Now here's why it gets relevant. I used to vote Republican. They claimed it would make times better for my race. I found out better. I don't vote now. Wilson was good as Mr. Roosevelt, I think. I voted about 8 years ago, I reckon. I didn't vote for Mr. Roosevelt. About 15 years prior, a young girl named Era Lee Settle, around 14 years old, who lived in Washington, D.C., wrote to President Warren G. Harding. Here are her words. Mr. President, lynching has been committed in the South for many years, but when the last presidential election took place, practically every colored boy and girl in America was for Warren G. Harding as president. Why did we want you? The answer was, he is a Republican and will stop that terrible crime, lynching. You were elected, but now and then there can be heard of a few lynchings. Mr. President, why do they lynch the Negro? Has not he done his full share or bit in the making of this new land? When America was fighting for independence, was not Crispus Attucks, a Negro, the first man killed? There are many others that could be named, but time and space will not permit me. When the trumpet was blown for civil strife, did not the Negro give his life as well as the Anglo-Saxon? During the World War, Negro boys also sacrificed their lives as well, and as bravely as the white men, that democracy might rule the earth. This reminds me of our glorious song, My Country 'Tis of Thee, Sweet Land of Liberty. Mr. President, you are aware of the fact that we have not our full liberty, but still we sing the song by faith in the future. But the case can't be made that simply because 70 to 150 years ago that most black Americans were Republicans, that we should now be Republicans. Especially when those very same people, as early as 1886, 20 years after the Civil War, and about 10 years after Reconstruction, started to make the case that black Americans should leave the Republican Party. You can't distort truth, change around facts to support your position. But one more hope remains for those who still adhere to the idea that the Negro problem can be solved by political methods. The present Democratic administration may be expected to do something to settle this question, and I assume the responsibility of advising and urging the Negro to go out of the Republican Party into any other party that he may find that will secure to him the full and free exercise of his rights as a laborer. For a party that does not or cannot secure to its members their primal rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, does not deserve support or success. In recent years, the number of colored voters who have become lukewarm in their allegiance to the party has steadily increased, and no effort has been made to counteract the efforts of the opposition to capture this element. The platform makers passed the Negro and his condition by with an indefinite phrase. I am surprised beyond measure to see that in the makeup of the Republican Advisory Committee, now being selected in connection with the coming campaign, there does not yet appear the name of a single colored man. Until recently, the masses of the colored voters of this country have uniformly voted with the Republican Party, because every right that they enjoyed, every privilege that has been granted them, has come through the beneficent influences of that party. Voters who have shown such loyalty to party surely ought to have such ornamental political representation as that involved in being members of the advisory committee of the party. Admitting that the 13th and 14th Amendments were passed by the Republicans, what has the Republican Party done to make them more than a scrap of paper to Negroes? With the exception of the administrations of Cleveland, Wilson, and Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Republican Party has ruled the United States since 1860, and yet it has done practically nothing to enforce those amendments to the Constitution or the Bill of Rights so far as Negroes have been concerned. It permitted peonage, lynching and disenfranchisement, and sought to still the cries and protests of a bruised and battered people by a small handful of jobs chucked to a chosen few. It surrendered the unreconstructed South 9 years after Appomattox, and thereafter consistently sidestepped its plain duty and obligation. It permitted mobs of cluxers and red shirts and regulators to drive their enfranchised freedmen from the ballot boxes and place its approval upon this wholesale denial of fundamental democratic right and duty. The Negro's discontent with his treatment at the hands of some of the leaders of the Republican Party has grown steadily for a generation. With each attack upon his status in party councils and the apparent indifference and ignorance of most of the leaders of the party toward his problems, the loyalty and devotion of the Negro to the Republican Party has gradually diminished. The Negro's discontent was climaxed by the Lily White program of President Hoover. It resulted in a great exodus of colored citizens from the ranks of the Republican Party. Along with millions of white Americans, more Negroes left the party in 1932, and still more left in 1936. Today, there are more Negro Democrats than ever before in the history of the country. I trust what black people say about themselves. There are those who talk to white people about black people on some media outlets. See, some people take what white people say about black people over what black people say about themselves. You have Larry Elder on Twitter having to come out and say that he was wrong, that there were no Republicans who owned slaves. This is after Dinesh D'Souza got corrected by historians for also saying on Twitter that there were no Republicans who owned slaves. These things are just not true. It's okay to be a black Republican. It's okay to be a black conservative. It's okay to make the case that the Republican platform is what's best for African Americans, or whether it's the Democratic platform, or whether it's the Green Party platform, or the Libertarian position. Make those cases that it's best for African Americans. What you can't do is distort the truth to support your position.